Hello. Busy one today. Woke up early to go pick up mom's prescription from her doctor because she's on oxycodone, excuse me, which is an opioid. I'm 99% sure about that. It's a controlled substance, so they couldn't call the prescription in. Why they couldn't fax it, I don't know. But instead, they just had a man, because the doctor's main office is in Savannah. They brought it to Statesboro, where I picked it up. While I was in town, I got my flu shot at the place I picked my meds up. So I am immunized from the flu, thank God. It cost $44, but kind of ridiculous, honestly, this year of all years. Just because I'm uninsured, I have to pay $44 to get the flu shot. Anyhow, at least the COVID vaccine was free, you know. Then drove to town, or from Statesboro back to the small town near us, where I dropped off mom's prescription, picked it up once it was filled, grabbed lunch, and came home. All in all, I was gone from 9:30ish to about 12:30, so about 3 hours. And then later on in the afternoon I took the trash off. Other than that, finished up Fusion. And was gonna do Super Metroid randomized. But RetroArt wasn't running it right, and after half-heartedly fighting with it for about half an hour, I just kind of gave up, and instead started AM2R. I know I'm not gonna make myself finish it before Dread. One of these days I do need to finish it. I really, really do. It's great. I don't have any reason not to, aside from lack of perseverance. I was thinking about it at a while, and you know how closely that, you know, how close the release of that was to Samus Returns, because I remember when it first got pulled, everyone was disappointed, but not necessarily surprised. Though Nintendo didn't really pursue it the way you kind of expect them to with these projects. All they did was, after 24 hours, say, hey, you have to take down the official downloads. You don't have, you know, we're not going to go hunter-killer on it. You don't have to, like, prove to us you destroyed it or whatever. You just have to take down the official downloads, knowing for a fact that it had been in the bloodstream of the internet long enough that it was out now. There was nothing really you can do about it. And all that good stuff. And I remember, you know, a lot of us were befuddled, because at that time, Metroid had seen very, very little official attention from the company, aside from Federation Force, which was fine in retrospect, but at the time it was still a sore point, because at the time Metroid had just been dead for, I know the last one to come out before Federation Force was Prime 3. So if you're going by the last game in the Metroid universe, it's Prime 3, which I'm 90% sure either came out in 2009 or 2010. I'm pretty sure it came out while I was a senior in high school. maybe a year earlier than that. Actually, almost definitely a year earlier than that. Because, no, it was a good bit earlier than that, actually, the more I think about it. Because, well, we did not have internet at home until I was a junior or senior, and I remember getting stuck towards the end of Corruption and not being able to look it up. I believe, you know what, I think I'm thinking of the full trilogy re-release on the Wii when I say 2009, 2010. Because that came out not too long after Corruption, just like a year or two after Corruption. Like in Japan, I don't remember how it's. I think there was a Pikmin one that, new play control was a thing that they were doing with some GameCube games, and I think the Pikmin one was, I don't know. I feel like a lot of them were, or a good chunk of them were Japan exclusive, and one of them was the original Metroid Prime. Either that or it never got released, and instead they decided to just, soft remaster the whole trilogy. And by that I mean, graphically, the Wii was not a huge upgrade from GameCube. We went to technically HD, but where everyone else was running 1080, the Wii was putting out 720. Technically. Now, Nintendo polish usually made up for that. A lot of times, you could look at like a Mario Galaxy game, and if you're a stickler for it, you could definitely go, "Oh, that's not true HD." But at the same time, you don't really care. Like the Wii, the Switch is capable of full HD. It's not always great at it, but you look at something like Mario Odyssey, which looks fantastic and runs really well. In my memory, I don't think I ever really had too many performance issues with Odyssey. There were points where my performance was an issue, but not the games. Anyway, point being, way off topic there. Point being, it had been a long time since we'd heard anything from the Metroid franchise at all. And then here comes, we'd heard whispers from Reggie that a traditional 2D style Metroid was in development and a Prime style Metroid was in development. And when Federation Force came out, I remember specifically my reaction was, this better not have been the Prime style game he was talking about. I played it, I finished it. It's all solo, and it was fine. It really, really was fine. And even though I know it wasn't, or I'm pretty sure it wasn't, in the end, it just reeked of the same insincerity that Star Fox Adventures kind of had, where you feel like this was another game, and then that wasn't this. I don't remember the exacts of Dinosaur Planet and everything, but like with Federation Force, it felt like this is a game. Honestly, it didn't help that it was introduced to us with this weird soccer game where it was like 2-on-2 soccer, or maybe even 3-on-3, and it felt like Rocket League was really big then, And it felt like a piss poor attempt to capture some Rocket League fame, but they couldn't figure out what to do with it from there. So then they just shoehorned it and crammed it into a an established IP. And why they picked Metroid of all things, I will still never understand. And then a year or two later, you have AM2R, and there was the pulling of the downloads, and everybody's like, why? It's obvious Nintendo doesn't give a shit about Metroid anymore. But then, like, I want to say it was less than a month later was E3, and while most of it was focused on the coming soons, two of the big things were officially announcing that Prime 4 was in development, and announcing Samus Returns, a remake of Metroid 2. And we're like, oh, this is why. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. I understand now why they were feeling mildly threatened by AM2R. But luckily, the direction that Samus Returns went in, they went in very different directions. AM2R, I feel, is peak classic 2D Metroid. It takes everything good that 2D Metroids have ever done, all the best parts of Super, of Fusion, Zero Mission, all the way back, and applies them in probably the most efficient way, and just gives you a really tight, it feels good to play. One thing about getting into Metroid is starting with if you start with like Fusion or Zero Mission, the restricted amount of controls can make you feel kind of like you're fighting with it. I had that issue a lot. I had that a bit in Super Metroid when I was first getting into it. But AM2R implements everything so well that for the most part I don't really struggle with controls. Any of the struggling I was doing today was just me coming immediately out of playing Fusion on the same controller and just, relearning which buttons did what. I do that on games, period. So that was the environment I played it in. Samus Returns kind of, I don't want to say redefined, because that's a corporate buzzword. It, instead of focusing on God, how do you describe it? It's like things. The big points of the original Metroid games were like the pinpoint accuracy, keeping steady, staying on your toes and stuff. Where AM2R really was able to bring out fluidity of motion. And stuff, because like up to that point, the highest res Samus we had in action was Other M, which, while pretty to look at, and again, like, story aside, because dear God, Other M could have been fun if it let you use a joystick. Team Ninja's capable of making a fun game. but having to make one, having to make a, having to make a 2D and 3D game on the sideways Wii remote, I'll just never understand. Like, seriously. That was the stupidest decision ever. Just period. Samus Returns kept some of, it dialed it back some, but it kept some of Samus's flamboyancy. Essentially, the Samus we see in Smash. We know she's more than her arm cannon. And it introduced the counters, and there were like little quick time stuff. And Dread seems to be going to expand on that. But even just her moving in cutscenes. Like, I rewatched the announcement trailer for Dread today, and towards the end of that, there's a shot from one of the robots chasing her, and just the detail in her running animation, where it's not the stiff pixels that we're used to seeing. She's not running with her spine perfectly straight, the arm cannon at the ready. You know what I mean? Like, she was running with both arms. And that's like you don't get that from Prime because the arm cannon's always there. Understandably, that's a first-person shooter thing. I wonder if Metroid could pull off Doom style. I don't know. I think Samus is a little too flamboyant for that, because Doom is direct and brutal, where some of the sliding and dodging and vaulting that Samus does would be jarring. Too jarring and disorienting in a first-person setting. I really hope Prime 4 is good. But I digress, because tomorrow, Dread. I am 14 again, and it is Christmas Eve. That is, like, genuinely. I am really, especially after replaying Fusion just over these last 2 days, like, I'm glad I did that. That got the hype really back up. I'm almost completely blind. Like, I've not seen anything past, let's put it this way, the only piece of post-announcement content I have seen that wasn't like the little bit of footage at the treehouse was this last Direct. I watched Vinny's commentary of it, and we were both like, I don't want to watch this, and I actually flipped my phone down. I was watching it on my phone. I actually flipped the screen down where I couldn't see it. And Vinny commented on a thing that he wasn't sure he saw. I didn't see it at all. So I have, the only thing is, like, a friend saw a commercial that they were telling me about. That's the closest I have to any type. I wasn't really listening to the story, but although the bits and pieces I got, it was just talking about the robots, which is, stuff we've heard before. Generic information on Samus. The point I was originally going to make literally 15 minutes ago was, I think ultimately going forward, looking back on AM2R and Samus Returns as remakes of Metroid 2, I think ultimately AM2R will be the better game in retrospect. The graphics will not age the same way Samus Returns will. It's more I think it's more accessible down the line than Samus Returns will be, because AM2R is free for one. All you need is a computer that can run it, and best I can tell, you don't have to have a great one. Whereas, down the line, you'll either need to know how to use, legitimate Nintendo 3DS trademark systems on your personal computer, which is tricky, especially considering, like, for instance, the Morph Ball is bound to the touchscreen. So, you gotta do... For someone like me who's only mildly familiar with it, Citra does really well at making it easy to bind specific tapping on the screen to a button. Like, it was fairly easy to set up, but I could see that not being, it's not going to be ideal for people. And another big thing where Returns fell short because it was focusing on a new style of gameplay above all, was enemy variation. There really were just like 5 basic types of enemies, and that was kind of it. In the first 2 areas of AM2R, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say I've seen more variety than the entirety of Samus Returns. So I think AM2R will stand as the better game, but Samus Returns will be more important. Not because it's this masterpiece that lives to be replayed. Frankly, even as a diehard fan, I wouldn't say I wouldn't necessarily say go track down, if you don't have a 3DS, go find one and get a copy of this game. Because you're not really missing anything that you can't just watch someone else do. Samus Returns focused really, really hard on the Metroid fights themselves. And especially when you get up to, the later variants, it really shines in those moments. But there's not a lot of substance in between. Whereas, I would say AM2R is a more consistent experience. With Samus Returns is probably more important because it was the shot in the arm that Metroid needed to not die as a franchise. I think, like, don't get me wrong, I don't think it sold like record-breaking. It wasn't like record-breaking sales or anything. But it was far from a flop either. I think if it had flopped, even if it was the exact same game, if somehow it had flopped, I don't think we would be getting Metroid Dread this year, if ever. I think that would have been the final nail in the coffin for official 2D Metroids. Maybe down the line they would try again with a different style of remake, focusing on Super Metroid instead as the base to try and revitalize it, if they felt like it, but that might not have ever happened, I don't think. There's a decent chance that, because I believe, well, no, I know for a fact, not the same year, but the next year they had to announce that they were completely restarting they were, like, Metroid 4 had been scrapped and rebuilt. They were going to a different team to build it from the ground up. It's heavily speculated that the original development studio was Bandai Namco, but it's never been revealed. As far as I know, it's never been revealed officially. But that was when they decided to go back to retro and let them do it. And they've made some interesting hires over the years. I'd say that if 2020 had been any other year, the fact that we didn't hear anything about Metroid Prime 4 this year would be bad news. But given that 2020 and 2021 have so far been the years that they are, I'd be willing to say, even if we don't see it at E3 next year, I'll only be disappointed if we don't. No, it would be next year's E3. I'd start to get disheartened if they didn't have anything to show by next E3, or anything they were willing to show. Because I doubt they have literally nothing to show now. But Nintendo is very particular about, and is getting more so particular about when they show their games. Like Metroid Dread came out of fucking nowhere. Because I think, as good as Breath of the Wild turned out to be, they kind of learned their lesson with overhyping too early. And Metroid Dread, they were like, okay, this is the next big step for the series that could be make or break. We don't want, especially with everything that's going on with Prime 4 right now, we don't want to throw another thing out there to go stale on the table. So when it was ready, they were like, hey yo, here's Metroid Dread, you can play it in 4 months. July, August, September, June, or is it May? Either way, you can play it this year. You'll be playing this soon, and they've pushed it really well. And partially because this is kind of the only big release they're getting out before holiday, first party anyway. Like both the remakes of Diamond and Pearl and the new Pokemon game aren't gonna make holiday. Most likely because of COVID more than anything. So aside from, it's pretty much just this and the Age of Calamity DLC. Sure, Mario Party came out, or is about to come out, or came out recently, but that's remake. God, it's still really exciting that I'm going to be playing a completely new Metroid tomorrow. A completely new Metroid. A brand new Metroid that expands on the combat systems of Samus Returns, is in full HD. The trailer looked like, I haven't looked up to confirm this because I refuse to look up anything without getting sideways spoiled. But rewatching the trailer today on my phone, it was in 60 FPS, I think, and I don't think YouTube can just do that. I don't think they can make a non-60 FPS. Maybe they can, I don't know. But even if it wasn't, it was very smooth and consistent. I'm just so excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. If for some reason it doesn't show up tomorrow, I'm probably going to be depressed. There's no indication that it won't. But man, I've been burned before. Anyhow, this has somehow become 30 minutes long. I am excited and passionate about Metroid. I'm going to bed. God, I'm gonna have to sit up for like 10 minutes while this processes. I'll catch you all tomorrow.